and that we're all a part of it, even if it's very far away. But any it's like a chess move. Any little move that you make is affecting the larger game.
Definitely.
And I think in urban areas we often feel that we're just left out of any dialogue. Who wants to think about the deep down ghetto in the Bronx? No one. We're just forgotten about.
It's
so
true.
That's kind of an exciting project. And I had another roundtable at the Andrew Freeman House.
Okay.
And I had a teacher come in. It was an odd hour, and I always think to myself, whoever comes is meant to come.
Was that part of the No Longer Empty?
Yes.
Okay.
Those two pieces were in the exhibition.
Yes.
And then I proposed this little round table, and that was exciting with the teacher because she's from New Jersey, but northern New Jersey, very suburban.
Yes.
But she teaches in the South Bronx, and this school was actually rescued by the parents. They were going to close it down, but all the parents, neighbors, everybody and their mother around the block showed up at that open meeting that the DOE holds before shutting a school down, and they saved the school. So the kids are really politically active, and the teacher wanted to, she's an art teacher, so she wanted to introduce different forms of art, so that's why she came to the round table.
Oh.
To get more engaged in introducing the idea of social practice to the kids.
Yes. Yeah, because it lends itself greatly to curriculum building,
Absolutely.
And critical thinking skills.
I think that's one of the great things about art, is that you're able to translate these really complicated issues in ways that are more accessible to people.
Oh, did we get that on camera? Awesome.
And I think that was the great part about having that teacher, and I think that really brought it home, that point home, because through this whole process, and when I started social sculpture or social engagement or more performance work. Through the process, I always ask myself, like, why am I doing this? What's brought me here? Like, I didn't start kind of doing this. I started doing photography, and but what's brought me here? And I think part of it is that motivation, or that love of the audience, and that motivation of what can happen when two people or a few of us are together in this situation that I've created.
Yes.
Like, what does it reveal about ourselves?
Yes.
And I think what's interesting with social engagement is, what does it reveal about what we're capable of doing? No one has a responsibility to do anything, but it's just knowing that you have the power, the knowledge to be able to do something out of this context, a very safe situation that I've created. You can make something even bigger and brighter out of it when you leave with it. And that's one of the exciting things about this bill, this Percent for Green bill.
Yes.
It's something that was created out of just talking.
Right.
In a very safe environment that art creates.
That's right.
There's no pressure. It's not politics. It's not a test. It's just that beauty of exchange.
The conversation that form, just the kind of when people sit down and are face to face with each other and exchanging energy in that way and ideas and talking, is typically the jumping off point for anything. And it's an intangible thing. Speaking, some could say, words are physical, but it's typically this intangible thing that leads to the physicality of our real lives. It starts from a conversation, and then it becomes a law, then it becomes legislated, or it starts from a conversation, and then next thing you know, you've got an organization, and your organization then has to yield really real results of some kind, like that kind of the thing that happens, or the potential of what can happen just from starting the conversation, just from starting the dialogue. There's a lot of power in that, and you bring up a lot of points that I would like to talk about. One of them being, you said that you started off as a photographer, and I'm really interested to know what your practice is like, where you started from, and then how you came to where you are now, and the ways that you're working now. If you could just lead us through that journey.
I think how I got here now is wanting to contribute more to the world I'm living in,
Mm-hmm.
rather than just contributing a pretty picture.
Mm.
Like, what more can I contribute to society around me?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as a kid, I was the kid who joined the Greenpeace Club, you know, and the kid who marched with PETA, and who enjoyed that. It was awkward, but I enjoyed that the activism.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that there are better activists out there
Mm.
than I am. But that's still very much part of my beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And
The activism, those inclinations to be an activist, make you want to become an artist?
well, if you think about it, no, right? If you want to become an artist, you're meant to create something either aesthetically beautiful or somewhat maybe more intellectually vigorous.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and those things exist,
Mm-hmm.
of course, because you need to draw in the audience in some way. Those things exist. But it's also about redefining what something aesthetically beautiful is or intellectually vigorous. Those ideas technically interest me,
Yes.
as well as this interest, my own interest in anthropology or in sociology or in cultures.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was a drama major, and I ended up doing that because I didn't think I was good at anything else when I was in high school. So I was like, okay, let me just,
I'm good at drama.
I'm good at drama. But later in life, as I traveled and lived in other places, I realized, my God, I wish, you had that fairy godmother counselor, or guidance counselor, or advisor to just kind of like slap you in the head a little bit and tap into all these other things that interest me.
Mm-hmm.
So I think technically, anthropologically, that idea of the ethnographic study or the autoethnographic study interests me.
Mm-hmm.
It's that artifact of human endeavor or human action or what humans are able to produce,
Mm-hmm.
and the idea of what's left after a civilization has passed interests me a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So and I see these people as being artists. That's what we dig up. We dig up the ceramics. We dig up the reliefs. This artist created that. Mm-hmm. So as an artist, what do I have to say about the society that I'm living in?
Yes.
Is it? And the ways that I tap into that have to go back to my interests.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of stopped myself because I was thinking, yes, I want to contribute something more than, God, Richard Avedon was a great photographer. He's very inspiring in many ways. But what are other aspects of culture that we're able to contribute that can reflect what other human beings or civilization was actually up to at this time?
You bring up a really good point. A couple of points that I want to touch on. I hope that I do not lose track of those points in putting these questions forward. But you talked about wanting to contribute to the conversation on aesthetics, and also to contribute your own type of intellectual vigor, right? To insert those things into what already exists within the realm of art, but then also larger than just art, culturally. You want to contribute to those conversations as well. So I wonder how you are making those contributions. If you could just if you talk through certain projects in relation to how you're thinking about aesthetics and how you're thinking about the conceptual or the intellectual aspect. What do you borrow from? You talk about the anthropological and the sociological and the ethnographic, and what are you pulling from these things to make the contribution or your intervention into aesthetics and conceptualism?
I think one of the things that I pull out of it is the storytelling aspect.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that might be where the performative aspect comes in.
Mm-hmm.
I think another aspect that I am always questioning, I don't have any answers to, but I'm always questioning, and I was rereading John Berger, Ways of Seeing.
Mm-hmm.
I have this project called the Bookcase Project, and I'm reading everything in my bookcase,
Mm-hmm.
no matter what order it is, because some things I haven't read in a very long time, and some things I don't even know how I got some books.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, John Berger was the next one. So I was reading this Ways of Seeing, and there's something that struck me, which is so true that we forget about, how art has always been made to reflect the wealthy patron who's paying for it.
Mm.
You know, and then I think it was Rembrandt that he was talking about, and Rembrandt was dirt poor at one point, and he needed coal, and the wealthy council gave him some coal. So in return, he had to paint this painting of them, and it had to reflect them, and he got into a dialogue about how maybe Rembrandt was slightly peeved at them, so he didn't paint them in such a flattering reflection. But the thought of how a work of art reflects the wealthy patron
Mm-hmm.
has always struck me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not making art for a wealthy patron. No one is commissioning my doing this.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel that these larger issues are climate change
Mm-hmm.
or factories going out of work, like for the Celadora project, no cookies.
Mm-hmm.
I think these larger issues are commissioning my doing this work.
Mm-hmm.
When I look at my kids, like, how am I contributing to possible answers that they might think of
Right.
later on?
Right.
I think that's what's making me
Mm-hmm.
do the work.
Mm-hmm.
When I think about that intellectually.
Mm-hmm.
And then with the documentation, when I have a live event, what's left over is the documentation of it.
Mm-hmm.
That becomes the artifact.
Mm-hmm.
That becomes the last piece of information that's left of an event that's taken place.
Mm-hmm.
The semiotic conditions are going to take over because it's a photograph or it's a video.
Right.
And I usually aim more for the photograph, and how does that photograph going to describe the work or describe the feeling of what was occurring on its own, rather than it just being, documentation, two people sitting.
Right.
So that technically inspires, gets me a little happy about more intellectual questions that
Mm-hmm.
I have.
Mm-hmm.
How the performance is an artifact,
Mm-hmm.
and how that record can be kept.
Mm-hmm.
Coming from drama, one of the worst things is seeing a play recorded.
Yeah. Yes.
And it sucks for the actors and the director who have to watch, look at this documentation. So that always kept them back in my head. Like, how can I capture the essence and the feeling
Mm-hmm.
of this piece?
Mm-hmm.
That's really meant to be experienced or seen live.
Live. Yeah.
I think I've answered some. It's a hard question what you've asked, because there's so much. The newspaper draws inspires me.
Mm-hmm.
The PC Legal Death.
Mm-hmm.
It was inspired by the death of this Honduran undocumented worker who was found frozen to death in Long Island.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a strong reaction to that, because it was a person who was found frozen to death because they didn't have a place to live, and they came here in order to earn more money to send back to their families, to provide them for a better place to live. And I had such a strong reaction. I wanted to reenact that. I wanted to try somewhat, not entirely, to connect to that person's experience in order to validate their story,
Mm-hmm.
because it seemed like all their effort just was erased with his dying in the forest.
Right.
Froze it to death with no one to kind of wake him up.
I mean, it says so much about the limitations of a particular ideology, you know, and when that ideology fails, right, and then all the dreams and the mythology of coming to a place for a better way of life confronts the lack of resources and the reality of that place, you know, and also the ways in which a person can be so disenfranchised from the society, the community in which and where they're situated, that something like that can happen. You know what I mean? And I asked the question about the aesthetics, you know, the contribution that you aim to make aesthetically and intellectually, because so much a part of this process is about locating where the art is, you know, and when you open yourself up to notions of social engagement, then you really start to open yourself up to being disoriented, especially when you want to apply those things to art, right? I think that if you think about social engagement politically, economically, or, you know, other aspects of ways of thinking about mobilizing socially, it makes more sense in just, you know, in a general conception. It makes more sense. But when you open it up to art, then it really starts to throw things off a little bit, because the way that art has been professionalized, you know what I mean? It's really about staying within its field, you know, and making people experts in being able to identify a particular thing as art.
Right.
You know, it's like you're trained your eye to be able to know when you're looking at art, right? And then so much of the history is built along that antagonism. Whenever the eye changes, like, oh no, now this is art now too. And it's like, no, it's not art, because this is art.
Well, I guess that's the commodification of art, right? You know, you're training your eye. Sometimes you're not really training your eye to see if something is art. I can call that art. That's the power that I have.
Mm-hmm.
I can say that's art. That table there with the kid, that's all art. But what the trained eye does is have to put a value on that.
Right.
Have to put a price on what that's worth in order for it to be sold as art.
Right.
So I think that's where it starts blurring. When you're dealing with social engagement, you're dealing with something so non-tangible. You know, what we're experiencing right now, the art of that is the beauty of the exchange, of the communication occurring, of ideas springing up, that we can't touch.
Right.
Someone can't come in and you know, survey it and say, well, maybe that costs $10,000. Maybe that's a $10,000 experience.
Right.
And I think that's something that really interests me, is how do we start to make it less commodified? How can something beautiful doesn't have to be something tangible, something that we have to touch or put a color to.
Right.
It can just be something that we're feeling, something that someone's observing.
Yes. Let's talk about that more, because value is a major part of this as well, in trying to devise a granting process, right, where value is inherently built into it. And how do you start to establish value for a feeling, you know, or an experience? And one of the, I think, fascinating things about this project overall is that within it, it already kind of knows, it's very aware of its limitations. It's like, you know, we can't, you know, monetarily fund everyone. You know, we don't have that ability. You know, there's just not enough money to go around from this particular funder. But how do we then make it worthwhile for every artist who decides to participate, these 20 artists who say, yes, I want to be nominated and open myself up to this process? How do we still generate value for them, so that even though there will be 4 artists that get the $10,000 grant, right? How do we make a value system that can lend itself to all of the 20 artists that have agreed. You know, I mean, that's like part of what it is that we're trying to develop. And so I'm presenting this to you because I'm interested in where you see value within your practice. That doesn't necessarily have anything to do with currency in terms of money, right? But other means by which you evaluate what you're doing.
Well, information is valuable.
Mm-hmm.
That something's recorded and being done is providing information for the next person
Mm-hmm.
to pick up from that,
Mm-hmm.
or to refer to it,
Mm-hmm.
or simply be inspired by what is occurring.
Mm-hmm.
I think that information is priceless,
Mm-hmm.
and knowing that I'm doing it and it's documented some way, even if it just exists on the web right now, is value on it to itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's probably encouraging artists to realize that value.
Mm-hmm.
We have bills to pay.
Right. That's right.
So
we gotta survive.
We have bills to pay, and sometimes it's torture.
Mm.
You know, it's real torture.
Mm-hmm.
It's the epitome of the dramatic artist.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just it's torture because there's so many things you want to do, but the way the system has been set up is not really accommodating you're carrying out all these projects.
Mm-hmm.
Because ultimately I think that commodity is what weighs long, you know, what takes over.
Right.
You know, I have to sell this.
Mm-hmm.
I have to sell something else
Mm-hmm.
in order to just get by.
Yes.
And I think that's what's most discouraging to artists who might want to touch upon doing social engagement,
Mm-hmm.
or other type of social sculpture or performance art.
Mm-hmm.
Is that missing link.
Mm-hmm.
And what drives you is just pure love or pure passion to want to just do it, to want
Right.
to get these ideas out. And it's just not about getting them out, because you're working with, you need the audience. They have to complete it.
Mm-hmm.
A passerby has to complete that engagement.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can't have you can have engagements on your own, but
But it's a different.
it's
know
a different
It's a different thing.
it's
altogether.
a different thing.
Yeah.
That's about self-reflection. It's the monk.
Mm-hmm.
It's the monk up on the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
But you want to bring these ideas and share them in order to spark activity in others,
Mm-hmm.
spark that idea of transformation.
Mm-hmm.
That art does so well, and it's so tangible and accessible.
Yes.
I think that's all I could lend if I were advising someone, is just keep doing it and you figure it out. You figure out how to do it. And if you need to stop because you need to feed or provide, then you stop for some time,
Mm-hmm.
but keep it going,
Mm-hmm.
because I mean, it's just your spirit has to it's this inexplicable thing. It's amazing. Sometimes I think to myself, like, God, it's just this continuous need to express an idea
And to create.
and to create it.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think that you touch on something that to me is an innate part of the human condition, and for me, it is why we are here in this form, you know, to create ultimately, as a means of expressing spirit. You know, it's kind of much larger than the physical body and much larger than physical form, but we're in this kind of physical form to create forms of whatever kind, whether they be tangible or intangible. You know, that it's just kind of a need just like water or food and air are a need to live. You know, there's this kind of need to create, but oftentimes, like you're saying, you get so caught up in surviving, you know, that it's just like that time and that space to create oftentimes is the first thing that has to go, you know, because you have to put your that energy towards, or that propensity towards making, into surviving.
Guys, I'm gonna pause recording just for 1 second. I'm good.
Okay. And now we have the kitty in the shot, which is beautiful.
It's always good, the animal shot.
Yeah. So, we were talking about audience. You had just brought up that point. And so I wanted to hear you expand a little bit more about how the audience is involved in the work that you do. And then also what it is there something that you also receive from them? You know, like you're definitely creating something for the audience, but then is there also something reciprocally that they're giving to you as well?
It is, and it's hard to put into words, but I mean...
But you'll try.
No, I will, and I have to like almost think back and put myself in the situation. Because what I get back is a sense of like almost completion. You know, yes, the project is complete, but then whatever questions I have, even if they're not entirely answered, that need is somewhat fulfilled. So there's a sense of fulfillment that comes from people engaging in the work, visitors, audience, or passerbys, whatever is set up. It's the study at the same time. I'm observed, but I'm also observing. I'm also studying the other person or the other people, you know, or just taking notes about human interaction, or just that the study of people, of how we go about being who we are. And I think again that's a more like an anthropological inquisitiveness on my behalf. Gorillas in the mist, okay, people in the mist. Like what situation can I create just to find out how people react to things, or find out more about us and then about myself, because I'm a person. So I find out a lot about myself through these engagements, and I think it goes back and forth. It goes back in a circle. You know, I think the audience finds out a lot about themselves through it. And that's great. Maybe it helps them out through a problem that you don't know about, but it happened just because of that engagement.
Could you talk about the different methods by which you set up these engagements? You know, you talked about the round table as a form, and you know, you have used playing dominoes as a form. You know, so if you could walk us through some of the forms that the engagement has taken, and why you choose particular forms.
With one series of engagements that I've been doing are reenactments, and they're reenactments of true narratives. The very first one being with illegal death, about the Honduran worker.
Right.
And I first did that isolated in the snow in the woods near my house, and I laid there for a few hours in the snow, and then I did it in a space. Excuse me. So I reenacted that whole environment, bringing the twigs and the branches and everything into the Bronx Museum, and that was the first time in that situation where although I was dead, I was still engaging with the people who came by, and we were in a dialogue. The a reenactment that I did was Enjoy the Revolution. I did that August 2011, where seeing the Arab Spring and experiencing what we're all experiencing here in the U.S., it just kind of struck me like, why aren't we having our own spring? What's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
So Enjoy the Revolution was sprayed throughout the streets of Cairo. And can't spray paint here. So I printed out about 100 leaflets with Enjoy the Revolution, and I passed them out near near Wall Street in front of the Wells Fargo building. I passed out these flyers. And all I said was Enjoy the Revolution. And people would ask me, what are you talking about? And I just kept repeating it as a sense of more control of Enjoy the Revolution, because that's what I wanted to take place. I wanted these ideas to be the only exchange that we had. So I just kept repeating things. Yeah, I just kept repeating it. And that was interesting because I got a variety of reactions. Some people wanted nothing to do with me. Other people were just in hysterics laughing because I think they made the connection between the revolution that was not happening here.
Right.
And something that needed to happen, and other people were just took it. You know, they just took the paper how you automatically take the paper, and that was most common, and that was interesting seeing that audience reaction. How many times we're just robots. We're not meant to think. We're not meant to really question these things. We just take it. We just take it. You know, okay, I'm going to work. Someone else is giving me something, and I just go and take it. And I mean, with myself, you know, you do that so often. You know, there's a way that you have to live, and the way you have to pave your life in a certain way. And when you're not doing that, you know, almost like the trouble starts because you're not conforming. So that was interesting experiencing. And then I reenacted the Stelladora strike, the 10-month strike of the Stelladora Cookie Factory. Stelladora Cookie Factory was one of the last manufacturing institutions in New York. The cookies, Stelladora cookies, you've probably seen them in your local supermarket. Been in the Bronx for 89 years. The Stelladora family sold it to this, you know, conglomerate of people, Briarcliff, and then Briarcliff wanted to cut, you know, sick leave, wanted to cut the pension, wanted to cut all the things that made the community on 238th Street and Broadway thrive. You know, people were being paid well. They were sending their kids to college. They were buying homes. They were making a living. They were surviving. And they wanted to cut this. So people struck for 10 months. And every day I would go to the supermarket to do my shopping with my kids. I'd see these people striking. Outside, rain, snow, cold, heat, they were there. The judge, you know, was in favor of the strikers. Okay, great. They went back to work. 3 months later, Briarcliff sold the factory to South Carolina. And now it's being built into this Riverdale passage or crossing, or I don't know. There's going to be a Trader Joe's and a BJ's and all these other
big box.
A big box thing.
Yeah.
Which, and I was there, and I reenacted a year after their strikes began and the factory closed. I reenacted these strikes, and I was there for about 8 hours, just holding up signs, you know, no cookies, no contract, just chanting what I remember experiencing every day that I would walk by. And it was great because some people had no idea that the factory closed, which was astonishing to me, because 3 days a week, the whole neighborhood, since I was a kid, would be filled with the smell of cookies.
Oh my.
Vanilla. It was amazing. It was like being in Willy Wonka.
Yeah.
It was amazing. People didn't know factory closed. Other people still thought that the people were striking. They thought that I was still part of the strike. And then you had the workers that were still left in the neighborhood. And this woman was just so thrilled that someone remembered what they'd done. And that was really powerful because it was validating again that person's experience and their effort. So that was quite powerful, just having, talking to her, and then having some other workers like actually pose with me with the sign, because it seemed like their efforts were shot down
Right.
at the end of it.
Right.
But just reenacting that gave them reason to, someone's patting them on the back for something.
Oh yeah.
So that was incredible. So that's one way that I engage the audience, and I've been working on other reenactments slowly. And then the other one that you mentioned was this domino game, and that was very site-specific to 14th Street, and something that's so part of New York culture is playing game on the streets, and just this limiting of how we use public space in recent years that I'm reacting to. And the beautiful thing about playing dominoes for 5 hours, having these games on 14th Street, was everyone would stop by, drop by. The people who knew how to play dominoes, which is astonishing. People who actually missed seeing that interaction on the street, where now people are not interacting, no one knows their neighbors. That was one of the reoccurring comments. Like, I don't know who lives next door to me anymore. But, you're sitting here and you're actually inviting me to sit and spend time, is something that I hadn't experienced in I don't know how many years. That was one comment. And that was quite fun. That was just fun. And again, one of the first times that I'm actually talking to people were in other reenactments where I have masks, revealing myth or the disappearance of other in New York City. It was a series of interventions where I masked my face with real estate clippings, and it was a reaction of like the rising cost of living in New York City, and having to sell products for 4 digits to be able to make ends meet, or responding to bailout. And I masked my face. I did it for a few other projects, revealing myth in Harlem and revealing myth in Peekskill, where I purposely was not speaking, and my intention was for speaking not to be our first modes of communication. For our obviously I'm exchanging glances with you, you're there, but having the conversation be about my presence and your presence. And that was powerful because we weren't talking. We were just with each other. When I did the piece in 2007 in Harlem, I did Revealing Myth Harlem, and I got a Shishama grant for a month in the studio space, and I sat for 21 days, 8 hours each day, making paper masks, and the storefront door was open, and people were just invited to come in. And we were communicating through this mirror in front of me, where it showed our reflection. And having to do that for 8 hours, for very long periods of time, and engaging people who were in between. They were in this limbo of in between, going to work, coming from work, on a day off, going to do the shopping, and just coming in and having a moment, a very quiet moment, where it was just our being together, was the exchange, was it's kind of magical. And it asked us to slow down. I slowed down. The people who came in slowed down, and we were just being.
Right.
And we would look out, see someone sat for hours one day. This guy sat there for about 2 hours. He just sat and looked out the window of the storefront onto Harlem we were on Powell. And we would just, I remember turning, my mask was drying, so I just turned, and we were just both looking out onto the streets. And that observation was great, of being in tune with the experience of another person as we were experiencing it together.
I want to also ask you about the notion of generosity. Because as I was explaining earlier, I'm really curious about how generosity plays into this idea of interaction and exchange, particularly in some of the things that you bring up with relation to value, and how the audience offering you a sense of completion. So I'm just curious about how that idea functions for you in your work. And where would you locate the generousness or the generosity in your practice?
I think people are so generous to give me the time
Mm-hmm.
that by far it's the audience's generosity that's the greatest.
Mm-hmm.
When people participate, they're giving me the time to do this,
Mm-hmm.
and they're completing it.
Mm-hmm.
If it weren't for them, it'd be unfinished.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the largest sense of generosity
Mm-hmm.
that I can pinpoint right now.
Mm-hmm. And do you see that also in relation to the value of a work or the value of the experience?
I guess art wouldn't be art without the generosity of someone taking the time to see it. You
Mhm.
just go under someone's bed.
Mm-hmm.
So and again, I think that's where that has the highest value, is the exchange of that audience.
Right.
Looking,
Right.
admiring,
Yes.
participating, hating, whatever it is. That's still generous. It's a
Mhm.
response. You're not talking to yourself, you don't go crazy. It's
Mhm.
that conversation, that dialogue is continued
Mm-hmm.
because of what someone else, the time that someone else is giving.
And do you think that there's something particular to the notion of social engagement that reveals this aspect more so than, just say the kind of standardized idea or general idea of what we have about art?
Yes, because I think social engagement tries to make it more tangible or articulates that that generosity of the audience,
Mhm.
taking the time to look and appreciate.
Mhm.
I think it really focuses on that.
Mm.
It focuses on what's happening between artwork. If we look at traditionally painting,
Mhm.
viewer,
Mhm.
it focuses on not just object person, but on what's occurring here.
Right.
And I think that's what social engagement does. It's when we don't care about the painting. We want to focus on what's happening here. This
Mhm.
dialogue.
Right.
And it has to be engaging and socially so for it to work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right.
I think that's great. I think that was a great response. And before we close, I think we still have a little bit more time. I just want you to say your name, who you are, and tell us where we are right
Like
now.
the studio or Bronx, New York?
The Bronx, like that, your name, and that we're in
Oh.
the Bronx, that you're in your home.
Oh, okay. Do you want me to look at the camera?
Oh, you can look at me. Look
Okay.
at the camera.
I'm Alicia Grullon, and you're in my home / studio in the Bronx, New York.
Perfect. We good?
Yeah.
That giving from people
Mm-hmm.
who just stop by and say yes to you. Yes, I'm going to take the time right now. That's a great feeling.
That, the yes, that acknowledgement of reception,
Yeah.
I think is, to me, if we talk about value, it's one of the value systems that I'm really kind of focusing on when I think about social engagement, and the artist practices that I'm interested in is, that acknowledgement of receipt.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because I feel like receptivity is something that's taken for granted, and it doesn't happen as much as we like to think that it does. People are not as receptive as we anticipate them to be, and especially when you think about the artwork. You know, it's like you go into a museum, and so much about that museum experience, I think, for an average person is not a very receptive experience.
It's not catered for the average person to experience or to take in.
Exactly.
It's catered to sell. I mean, it comes down to the marketplace. It's catered to sell. It's catered to sell and to show so and so donated this to us, and we're going to write this into our grant this year. And the thing is that these institutions are great. They provide this great service at the same time. You wouldn't see many things or experience art. It's the only way we can kind of do it, by the way the system's been set up. But then at the same time, it's just not, it's so cold and sometimes clinical.
And passive.
And passive.
You know, it's a very kind of passive experience. It can be, I mean, I think if you're educated in a particular kind of way, then your experience with walking into a museum or a gallery is totally different, right? Because you have access to the different languages built up around art. But the thing about social engagement is that it very much focuses on that receptivity portion of the artist's relationship to the public or the artist's relationship to the audience, which as a curator is something that I find to be fascinating, because I'm always involved in that as this kind of mediator figure between the artist and the audience. And so constantly thinking about ways in which to generate receptivity, you know, where it's a conscious reception. It's not just, you know, kind of sitting back and maybe it's falling on you, but something in a person is like, oh, you know, like a light bulb goes off.
It shakes you up.
Yeah, it shakes you up.
It shakes you up. It knocks you off from your work home, wherever it is.
Yeah.
It's that interruption.
Yes.
And that experience in Harlem. I interrupted these people's lives and they said yes to it. I want to be interrupted. I want to get drawn out of this, like, you know, birth, school, work, death. I want to be out of that for just a moment.
That disruption, you know, that disturbance, for better or for worse.
And when you go to a museum, it's a setup. You know, you have to actually plan to go.
Right.
Social engagement just happens, and that's what I love. Why I love doing it on the street is because it just happens.
Yes.
It's there. And what's going to happen is going to happen, and you don't know what. And that's, you know, it gets your adrenaline up. You don't know. You know, you're put in a position where someone can clobber you. And in New York City, someone can clobber you over the head any minute.
Anything can happen.
You know, but that's exciting.
And allowing for that vulnerability, I think there's something to be said for using that vulnerability as productive space. You know?
Yeah. And that you can produce something in that space.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Is great.
Definitely. So, yeah.
Yes.
I think that I love all the conversations that I'm having with artists, and I think this was another fantastic one.
I can't wait to see them all.
Well,
you know, to see what other people are thinking about, because sometimes it's so isolating.
Yes.
So when you're doing it,
that's
it's
right.
so isolating.
That's
because,
right.
You know, you don't think that others are doing it. You know, it's only Marino Abramovich on HBO, but there are other people doing it. It's actually quite good. It's actually quite good. Yeah, it's actually quite. You know, it's good. And it's that dialogue that you're not alone.
Yes.
And I love the audience, because the audience says yes to you, and it's not like you know, it's not a pity party, but they're saying yes to the art experience.
Yeah.
But to find other artists who are also going through that process is really exciting about this project. To actually hear what they have to say, because unless you have a conference where everyone's getting together and talking, you know, so much is administrative.
Yes.
It's isolating because so much of our time is administrative.
Yes.
You know, we have to write the grants, we have to, you know, calculate, we have to plan. So little time is left for just doing what the Dadaist did. Just hang around your house and, you know, have spirits and talk about art.
That's right.
You know, that's an indulgence.
It is such an indulgence.
Oh my God.
It is a luxury.
It's a luxury.
It's such a luxury.
Like, cake and lemonade, girls. It's like wow. This is it's amazing just to sit back and hear other people talk.
Yes.
You know, but you know, now it's through it's through TV. I think, you know, that, like I said, at Abramovich's project, it was just interesting because, oh my God, someone's talking about it and it's on TV, and I don't have to pay $20 to go to the MoMA and hear someone talk about it.
Right.
It's here. It's happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think and it's also a conduit by which you can like explain yourself to other people. You know, it's like you know, it's not just me talking here. I mean, have you seen the documentary on, you know, Marina Abramovic on HBO? Like, these things are out there. You know what I mean? But a part of this project is also opening it up as a form of social engagement as well. So there's a lot, we're reflecting a lot on that and bringing in those instances into the grant making process. So to introduce everyone to each other is also a major component of that, and to, you know, kind of spurn this discourse and dialogue amongst you all as this kind of, you know, emblematic group of people who have said, okay, yeah, you know, we'll let you kind of take our name and attach it to this thing called social engagement. That's cool. You know, I mean, like, okay, all right, nice.